for it?
Yep.
Hello, everyone. Glad you're here. I've already said that to several of you already. I'm trying to get warmed up on what we're doing. And so, anyway, this is Saturday Night Live, and Saturday Night Live is about recovery. And Saturday Night Live has to do with dealing with all kinds of stuff. Life is messy. And so tonight, Kim is going to be sharing a step with us, and she's the topic out of step 6. She's going to be taking on, and the rest of us too. But she pointed the direction, so thank you, Kim. And that's taking time to grieve. And you know, I looked back at some of our past. Some of our past Saturday night sessions, and a few weeks ago we started on receiving forgiveness. The week before that was escaping self-deception, and then last week it was overcoming denial. And I think these have been really significant topics, and they seem to all kind of dovetail together with tonight. Tonight is about taking time to grieve. My topic that I'm going to be talking about is grief and recovery, coping with sadness and loss. So, and I haven't had a chance to talk about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's grief cycle for a long time. That's in this information that I'll be sharing tonight. So I think it'll be very good. So for all of us that's involved in other aspects of life, we all have to deal with grief, whether it's a loss of a loved one, loss of something, or even the loss, and we'll be talking about this quite a bit tonight, the loss of our coping mechanisms, our substances, or our behaviors that we have depended on for so long. We actually experience loss by beginning to let them go. So anyway, I'm glad you're here. I'm going to turn this over to Paul, and we're going to get started. So welcome, Paul.
Good evening and welcome to Saturday Night Live. I'm really happy to be able to do this again in person. And we're glad you're here. Saturday Night Live is about recovery. Now most of the folks have been around here for a while know there's a difference between being sober and being recovered. Being sober is just being miserable in the old lifestyle. Being recovered is having a new lifestyle and not feeling bad about it and not wanting to go back to the old lifestyle. So anyway, you're welcome here. You're welcome whether you're high or clean or drunk or sober. And first time I heard that, I thought it was kind of crazy. Why would you want a bunch of people at the meeting who are drunk or high? But kind of that's what we're here to get rid of. It does make sense, but in my head it didn't. And but you're welcome here in any condition, just as long as you don't cause any trouble. And I've not seen that happen to a point we couldn't handle it. If you're out in TV world and you want to come join us live, we want you here. You're welcome here. One of the things I love about Saturday Night Live, there's no judgment. Everybody that's ever come here has been welcome, and we care about you, and we want to help you have a better future. Saturday Night Live, we want it to be a safe place, so anything you hear here stays here, and we always treat one another with respect and honor. And one of those things is if you got a cell phone on, please turn it off. If you're at home playing on your cell phone, pay attention because you're going to miss something good. Our mission statement, our passion and mission at Saturday Night Live is seeing lives transformed by helping people find a personal relationship with Jesus and to find freedom through Christ being an example of love and acceptance. Saturday Night Live is about recovery. We're faith-based, but we're a recovery meeting. You don't have to believe what we believe. We're going to help you no matter what. We just want you here so that you can be in a safe place and learn some tools and coping skills and find recovery. A couple other things here. One of the things we do in recovery is acts of service. If you're not thinking about your own stuff and you're doing something to help somebody else, that takes your mind off of your own thing, and anything you can do that you see that's helpful for somebody else around here, it could be as simple as pointing out the restroom or picking up cups or something like that. But even out on the street and in public, if you see a lady at the grocery store that needs her stuff carried because she's too feeble to do it, or just anything you see that needs to be done, if you do something good for somebody else, it makes you feel better about yourself, and that's just a small step toward recovery, is finding good things out about yourself. Again, welcome to Saturday Night Live. They give me a minute to do a little reflection here, and the thing I thought about, this week I went to a funeral, and when we're in step 6 here, we're talking about somebody's gonna die. And in the funeral that I went to, we talked about, it was a young girl who was considered handicapped her whole life, but she was really happy and shared a lot of joy with other people. And at the time that the family was grieving because of the loss, they were so happy that this girl had went into the kingdom of heaven with a new life. They had mixed feelings because she was gone and part of them, but joyous because they knew where she was. And that's kind of what recovery is like. When we're looking for recovery, part of us is going to die. That part that controlled us, the part that did bad things to us and caused us to hate ourselves and hurt ourselves and make bad choices, as you recover, that dies and goes away. And that's kind of what they're going to be talking about tonight, is how to mourn that loss, because it is a part of you and you'll miss it because it's been comfortable and it's been with you for a long time. But on the other hand, there's the joy of just being able to wake up every morning and look at the sunshine and have a good and happy life and feel better about yourself and not need some substance or behavior just to get through the day. So anyway, we're going to move on, and we're going to have Kate come up and read the steps for us. Kate, would you come on down? Everybody welcome Kate.
All right, Kate.
Oh, here she comes.
All right. There you go. All right, so step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over our problems and that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, we made a decision to turn our wills and our lives over to the care of God. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. Step 7, we humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, we continued to take personal inventory of ourselves, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. And finally, step 12, having had a spiritual awakening, as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
Thank you, Kate. Everybody give Kate a big thank you. Thank you. And now Kim is going to come up and share the step information with us for the week. Kim, come on down.
All right, Kim. Yay. Well, we're glad to have Kim here. I'm glad to have Kim here.
Well, I'm just glad to be here.
Okay.
So step 6, we became entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. The section I chose, which I kind of regretted this morning when I was going, it's like, oh, yeah, is taking time to grieve. I have a lot to say about grieving and recovery. It's a lot like, very similar when we lose someone because of death, or a relationship, or a job, any of those life changes. And the grieving process is necessary in order for us to become entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. Personally, I hate the grieving process, but I know I need to do it. And it's like a roller coaster. You know, the first stage, although there's, well, Doug will talk about it later, but denial and shock. Paul talked about denial last week, I caught it on YouTube. And that's kind of crazy when that when death hits. I'm okay, I'm good, everything's fine. It's not. And sorry, I'm gonna be chaotic because this stuff is kind of messy. You know, one of the important things in the grieving process is, you know, we've done moral inventory, we've taken a look at our character defects, but we have to get real. And it's like, those things, those actions, those behaviors, what will you miss? Or what will we miss? And in my recovery journey, using drinking, using drugs, filled an emotional need, and that's important to address. For me, I wanted acceptance. I didn't know about it then, or was not consciously aware, but working the steps, you know, wanting that acceptance, that love. And in that, when, like, for me, because I can only speak on my experiences, that when those things come up, to feel those feelings, like fully embrace them. Sadness, anger, etc. But it's also in that you know, after, sorry, I'm kind of squirreling here.
Go ahead, feel free to squirrel.
Okay, I'm gonna squirrel. You know,
No,
that.
I didn't say you should squirrel, I said, feel free to squirrel.
Okay, well, I'm gonna squirrel about a little bit. Feeling those feelings are really important, because like what we've learned to do with our coping skills, or at least, well, I think most of us can probably agree that, you know, we repress, we numb out, we want to escape because we want to feel good or think that we're feeling good when it's really kind of the big fat lie. Then there's bargaining,
Yes.
which is also a part of recovery. If I just have one drink, if I just do just a little, I'm just gonna do it once, whatever that thing is. And usually it doesn't work out very well, but it's part of the process.
It is. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance
Mhm.
is the present 5 frameworks.
And you know, that's also one thing that I've learned that, and I'm not saying anyone go out and use, but like if you do relapse, it's okay. It's okay. Pick yourself back up, work the steps, you know, because it's part of the process. And also, the other things is like,
Ma'am, I gotta ask a question.
okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, this is kind of a difficult topic.
I know, and I was gonna hold it, but then I thought we're gonna miss the moment if I don't go ahead and throw it out here.
Okay.
And you said if you relapse, it's okay, but does a relapse help us deal with whatever we're having to process or go through or have guilt on or grief in? Does the relapse help us, is the question.
The relapse, yes. The using, no. Because I have a kind of a screwed up way of looking at things. I feel like we learn, well, at least most of the time, not always, learning from that experience. Like for me, I know like I can't just have one drink. I can't be in an environment where people are using drugs. It's just me. Because like when I get in grandiose thinking, my ego takes control and takes the driver's seat, and then it's like, with the relapse, okay, sorry, again, I feel really, sorry, I just totally lost my.
That's all right, I didn't even ask the right question that I was
Okay.
thinking on, but I'm glad that I asked what I asked. My question is, does this relapse or acting out actually shorten our grief ending?
Does it,
Shorten our grief ending?
it's part of the process, so I mean like, cause you know, there's some people that have been in recovery and that have not, you know, actually like relapsed as in using. So I wouldn't say it's shortened, but I feel like it's part of the process. From my experience.
But that's good, I like that. You know, because the information I had said, it had an emphatic statement that I had problems with. And it said that it didn't shorten the grief ending. But I think from what you just said and what I was feeling, that you recognize that it actually maybe didn't shorten it, but at the same time, the grief processes help you to come into acceptance. And so therefore, coming to reality that this didn't help me any, it does help.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And that's also like, you know, taking like a really and thank you, Doug, for refocusing me. Taking like, after we feel, been in our feelings and felt what we need to feel, taking a good look, because we have to let that go. But taking a really good look at what the cost of our actions, our behaviors have. What did that do for us? Did that serve us? And then also, in that process, what do we have to look forward to with a new life when we come to acceptance? So. Sorry for the squirrel.
We like you and the squirrel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Everybody give Kim a big thank you. Thank you. I want to take just a second to go back over that, the relapse question. A lot of times, the thought has been that if you mess up, it's like climbing a ladder and you missed a rung, and you fall all the way back down to the ground, and you have to start over. But while I'm down there, I might as well just stay down there and enjoy the misery for a while, because I'm worthless and horrible, and you feel like you got to start rebuilding from scratch what you've lost. And the reality is, if you're gaining on your recovery, it's more like walking down a road and you've made it 50 miles and you trip and fall down. You don't have to run all the way back to where you started. You stand up where you're at and you move on. And if you got that kind of attitude, it can make that relapse, which we don't want anyway, but sometimes it happens. But it doesn't have to turn into a week, month, 5-year repeat of the things you went through. Get up right where you're at. If you messed up today, tomorrow you can stand up in the same spot. I know a lot of people count their sobriety out in so many years or whatever, and they start over at scratch. But you really don't have to start over at scratch. And that's just kind of my little take on relapse. So many people want to use it for an excuse to waller in their addiction for another time frame, but you don't have to do that. You have a choice. If you fall down, get up where you're at, brush yourself off, and continue to move forward. So Tommy is going to come share a reflection with us today. Tommy, are you ready? Come on down. Everybody welcome Tommy.
Tommy.
Hello, everybody. Well, I said I'd do reflection, and then Kim picked this one. I was like, great. I don't want to do this either. So I got this. It says, we have all lost a loved one, may it be human or animal, even ourselves to our addiction. Each person grieves differently, especially if we are active in our addiction. Having just went through the 6-year anniversary of my mother's suicide, I'm glad today that I'm living sober. At the time of her death, I was not, and I went deeper in my addiction with substances that prior to this tragedy in my life I had never heard of, and believed in my drug-induced delusional thinking that I was going to find my mother somewhere alive. We would laugh that she pulled off a Machiavelli. Deep down, I knew that was not true, so I invented a fantasy to cover the hurt. It took 3.5 years for me to find myself in a really dark place that scared me severely. And I fought my way out, yes, with God's help. I knew the first thing I needed to do was properly accept and grieve the loss of my mother, Leanne Ewers, and come to a place to accept my faults and defects. It was not easy. I started to suffer delusions in other areas of life trying to distract me from the pain of the process. That made me realize I would not take the steps to heal properly if I continued to use substances. I found a person in me I didn't like who I was becoming. I finally came to my senses. It took a lot of therapy, not much medication, and abstinence from all intoxicants, and I finally came to a place today where when this time of life comes around, I don't use or resort to the lifestyle I found myself in during the time I lived in denial. I just keep living the life I have progressed into as I roll with the punches. I did think, it would be nice to have a beer on Memorial Day, yet I told myself that guy needs to go away. Some people may think the things we do to take time to grieve are strange, yet I have learned that if I didn't pay attention to the opinions of others while at the same time knowing that I was doing this to better my life, I was going to be okay. Grieving is an odd thing to go through, and I came to realize I am no longer the person I was, though at the same time I'm getting to know who I am. When we make it through to the other side of all the work, it doesn't stop though, and I have to be aware of triggers that send me back into a mental confusion that the days ahead, to send you back into confusion. So I try to keep my tools sharp to deal with myself and my interaction with the world around me, so that the days ahead are lived with clear sense reality with a better set of priorities, so when it comes around again, time to grieve, I can do it without destroying my life. Thank you.
Right, Tommy. Thank you, Tommy. Everybody give Tommy a big thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So now is the time that we move on to some of those tools. I like that you mentioned that you gotta keep your tools sharp. And Doug gives us lots of tools. He works hours and hours to give us this little bit of time here so that he can share with us and help us cope with life and give us some life skills. And he's gonna come do it again. Doug, come on down. It's Doug time.
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. I was wondering if I needed to sit down front or if right here is okay. You got any opinions? Okay, then I'll just stay right here. I will, I'd like to start off by saying, hey, I appreciate Kim, and even though I may have put you on the spot there, hopefully it wasn't too bad. You do pretty good, being on your toes there, you're able to handle that. And so, and I always appreciate that about you. So, but hey, look at it this way, I do the same thing to Zach and Lisa, so, I enjoy it more with Lisa though. Hi, Lisa. So, anyway, any comments about what we've heard so far? Yes, sir.
I had some thoughts every time that Kim talks. She sparks some thoughts. So it's nice to have her back, and nice to be back. For me, the relapses weren't necessarily bad if I let myself learn something from it. Going back to what you say. What did you learn? Instead of beating yourself up about, the relapse, what did you learn? If we could have that mindset, that attitude, which is hard to develop, but it's really healthy if we can do that. And then the realization that a lot of my relapses were the result of me beating myself up so bad that I wanted to escape myself. So I went and numbed out again because I was the one that was, I was beating myself right back over to the same behavior I was beating myself up for.
And we're talking about self-punishment, self-hatred, and that type of thing, because the intention is good, because you want to do better. But the tool that you were using was devastating, harmful, and actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but actually even it caused your cycle to go deeper.
Well, it was really to the point of you're abusing yourself.
Right.
It's you're abusive towards yourself. Because you wouldn't let anybody else do that to you.
Right.
And if you were doing that to you out loud, if you were saying those things to yourself out loud, somebody would tell you to stop her. They would probably call somebody to come get you some help. And
Yes.
and that's not just us in the room. That's everybody on the planet.
Yes.
So if we can learn to to allow ourselves to learn, learn from the mistake, then I think that the relapse can be beneficial. And then when you talk about the grieving, when I first read that in the step, I thought that was complete crap. I didn't buy that at all, because I think a lot, I'm not trying to speak for everybody else, but I think I've met a lot of people that agreed with me. I think a lot of us were like, I shouldn't like anything of that old life. We're supposed to shun everything from that old life and get rid of everything from that old life. And if anybody, if we knew people who held on to anything from that old life, we gave them a hard time about it, the reality of it is that whether you like it or not, or believe that you do, you need to grieve those things that you lost, because that was your life, and that's who you were for probably a large part of it. And just because you chose to do something different today, doesn't mean all that's gone. You have some wrestling to do,
Yes.
like when we come to God and, we have some wrestling to do, and we work out our salvation with fear and trembling. That's what it says about salvation. But we do recoveries like that too in its own way. You have to work out some of that stuff. And it's not an overnight fix. I didn't just wake up and I'm not going to use today. Everything's different, and so it's you may not want to admit it, and you may feel bad for it, but you're going to miss some of that old stuff, and you're going to not know who you are in your own skin for a minute, and then you're going to deal. I still deal with, it was funny. I said something at work, and everybody kind of laughed at me, but it kind of caught me out when it came out of my mouth. I've been frustrated. We've been looking for Kate a car, and it was the end of the team meeting at work, and there was just like 3 or 4 of us left, and some of my coworkers were asking me how I was doing. I said, I'm all right. I said, I've been a little frustrated lately, and they said, why? And I said, oh, well, I'm looking for a car, and I said, it's harder these days. And they said, it's harder these days. Why is it harder these days? And without thinking, I just said, well, because back in the day, no one gave me the runaround. They just, they didn't. I wasn't nice, so they didn't mess with me. They didn't lie to me. I'd have to play the game, They told me the truth, and no, you don't want that one, because they didn't want me coming back. Don't buy that one, because you'll come back and hurt me, and I would have, and so I didn't have to deal with any of that, and so now that I live by different rules, I have, and so and it's one of the things I absolutely hate is car shopping. I don't like it, and but anyway, and so I was just recognizing, that, and they were all everybody kind of got quiet, and I said, I'm sorry, it's BC thing, and everybody kind of laughed because they all know who I am. It's part of my job and everything, but there's some truth to that. Here I am. I've been in recovery for a long time, and I was missing what that old life got me. I didn't have to put up with some of the stuff that, living life on life's terms gets you. So anyway, but I think that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that don't be like me. It's real. You have to grieve that, and don't go around the block a few times like I did,
Well, we not only, this is my opinion, it's not even one time through grieving and we're done. It's because, actually there's a part of you, very possibly here, that's grieving some of that because there was some benefit to it, okay? Because that's the reason why we made those choices then, because there was some benefit, but we didn't consciously, we weren't consciously aware of the negatives, or we chose not to be aware of those negatives, you know, right?
Or didn't mind them, you know?
And so, yeah, we double down on what we want, to try to cover up what we got, which we didn't want, maybe. So, yes, I understand a lot of those dynamics, but then it comes back down that, you know, that some of the grieving is what you're saying is, that's what I used to be, but that's not what I want to be, you know? And yes, there was some benefits there, but at the same time, I'm gonna put words in your mouth. I'm gonna learn and grow and develop new skills and get what I need to learn out of this exercise, so that I'll be better equipped. How about those ones?
Take the risk.
And the rest of the story is, if you don't get those skills the first time, you may be doing a lot of shopping. Maybe not for Kate, but for others. Who knows?
You get opportunities.
I was trying to get you out of the mix there, Kate. So.
Oh, thank you.
Paul, you was gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking what an awesome thing it is to go back and look in your toolbox and that thing's not there. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's the bright side of what it is.
Yes, that is absolutely great, and that is, and even if you miss it not being there, because if we have tools that we miss, well, but I know why I miss it, because I chose it not being a very good tool for me to hang on to, and so.
Well, I really like to think it's back there just in case.
Well, I've had some stuff that was back there that I could have pulled it out, but you know, that's the way I used to be. That's not the way I choose to be, and so. But until you get to that place, you have a tendency to go ahead and pull that stuff out, or act those things out, or be involved with those things. Do we know what we're talking about, right? You know what's in your life.
That's what recovery is, though,
Yeah.
is when it's in the toolbox, even if it's way in the bottom, and you don't choose to use it,
Right.
you know?
It's kind of like a guy several years ago. He's a businessman here in town, and in fact, he's a member of our church now. And I'm not going to say his name, but somebody killed his daughter, and he's not related to anybody in here, and probably most of you don't even know him. And so, just protection. Anyway, he called me. He said, I'm sitting in front of the guy's house that I think that did it, and I got a .45 sitting beside me. And that was part of some of his old stuff, but it tapped into it. But not so much that he didn't call me. You know what I mean? And so I said, well, is that going to resolve your situation? He said, it made me feel better. I said, would it? For how long? Do I? You like to say things without saying things, don't you? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, we all got stuff, and we all have grieving that we have to go through. And some of the information that I may or may not cover here, but a lot of people postpone their grief. They hide from it, right? They push it off weeks, months, years. They even said in the literature here, decades. We can recognize that, right? Because we don't want to deal with it. Why? Because it's painful, right? And if we can escape by various different mechanisms, substances and behaviors, right? Relationships, or just flat out denial. Some people have practiced putting stuff in a dark mental box, shutting a heavy lid on it, and putting it away. You can do that. I've heard research about people that have done that, and they would swear to you 20 years later that event never happened in their life. So it's possible. You know what? The brain is a fascinating piece of machinery.
Is that dangerous?
Well, let me answer that with a question. Everybody loves that one, right? And of course, everything is in degrees, but not living in reality, how beneficial is that for an individual?
Not at all.
Okay, no, that's not true. Okay, because there is a certain amount that God has given us some denial to help us to buffer the pain in the beginning,
Makes sense.
right?
Yeah.
And so he helps us to survive mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, socially, maybe even financially, to help us to address that emotional pain that's going on. And but as this literature says, and I also believe, but they said everyone grieves in their own way, okay? And that we should not let anybody put us in a box, and that there's not a specific time limit. But if you continue to go from from the first year into the second year, you may be stuck. In fact, they said if you go over a year, you may want to consult some form of help to help you process that, which I agree. Tommy, you just talked about you had a 3-year process.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the first year, you hit out along a little bit, and it bubbled up on you. I know you called me several different times. Okay. But those little bitty steps start to help you to come to that process, which we're going to talk about here, which is the final end, is be able to accept it. Acceptance is not liking what it is. Accepting is accepting that it's the way that it is.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's challenging, and it requires process, particularly if it's something that was a major loss or a lifestyle change that we're talking about here. I mean, when you're used to living in a particular way, even if you think about it in this term, and I've heard people say this, that have went from one continent to another, and when you move into a different people group, different culture, different mindset, could be exciting and also very scary, okay? And your norms that you were used to, nobody else knows.
Yeah.
And so you have to relearn and get and become comfortable in your life now. And you look back to that other place that you used to live. That's the reason why you always people talk about going home, because we're very fond of home because that's familiar. We may have not liked it when we were there, but when we're gone, there's something about it that we're fond of it, but there's parts of it that we look back to, and that's comforting to some degree. So, did I answer your question by asking a question?
Yes.
Okay, so and again, these topics that we've been talking about for the last several weeks, maybe it's for all the weeks, are complex, complicated, but I think very beneficial. And hopefully we're not just skimming across the top of them. Hopefully we bring some depth to them. Any comment? I needed that breath. Step 6 is we we're entirely ready for God to remove all of our defects of character. And that's a pretty big statement out of step 6. And that didn't mean that we were entirely ready. I see that as a transitional statement, that we want to be ready, we're getting ready, we're more ready than we were, and we're working to get there. And we do want it to be changed in our life, but we're not for sure if we're really totally 100% ready to let it go. Right?
It's an ongoing process.
It's ongoing, because we have to transform, and it's mental transformation, it's emotional transformation, it's social transformation, it's all kinds of different things, and they're so connected, right? Okay, but I believe if we choose where it is that we want to go, that we apply and try to implement step 6 in our life, these defects that I want to get free of, if we choose that that's what we really want, it begins to happen. In fact, we realize all those different ties, that the reason why those defects were there. They were there for some benefit at one time. You got something out of it, or you wouldn't have done it. But then the question is, what did that cost you? And what will it cost you? And how's that going to work out for you? Right? Does that make sense? Okay. So, well, I think I'm going to jump from our material and jump into my material and try to get to that, if that's okay. How about that? Sounds good?
Go for it.
The information that I'm going to be covering is grief in recovery. They were writing this from the perspective of those that are in recovery. Now, my definition of recovery and very possibly their definition of recovery may not be absolutely the same, because they were writing it in the perspective of drugs and alcohol. When I talk about recovery, it's not just drugs, it's not just alcohol, it's behaviors, it's substances, it's emotions, it's the messiness of life, because all those things are coping mechanisms to try to deal with known and unknown stuff that we're trying to deal with in our life. You guys got that, right? I hope you guys out there in video land gets that. So it's grief in recovery, and everyone, whether we're dealing with those that are trying to get free of pornography or sex addiction or gambling or overeating or living in the land of fantasy. You could just keep naming stuff, but I'm going to stop right there. And those are ways of escaping reality into a non-reality to help us to survive the present moment. And thank God that we survive. But if we continue to use that tool in our life, it begins, well, we all know that there's diminishing returns in what's going on there. You get less and less from it, and it costs more and more. Whether it's physical, mental, emotional, financial, social, spiritual, whatever. Correct? Correct. Okay. And so it's grief in recovery, coping with sadness and loss, giving up the addictions or addictive behaviors, and that can even be I always have dual thoughts when I come up to this statement, and that is there are spiritual church type things that sometimes we hide in to avoid reality of life instead of letting the truth of the gospel set us free. Sometimes we use it to cover us or hide us from reality. Is that as clear as mud? I felt safer saying it that way. So you know, it can be all kinds of things. You know, I want to say right here, I don't know everything. I am not sure about some things. I try to only speak about what I reasonably think that I know, but just because I think that I know it doesn't mean that I do. Does that make sense? Because what we learn is continually being upgraded or developed or matured. That information base, because there is a ton of information. I mean, you can even look in science, you know. Of course, 25, 30 years ago, they said the brain couldn't be regenerated. Now, everybody's talking about how neuroplasticity, which is the regeneration of your brain. So, I mean, I'm going to use this as a little bit of cover. If the scientists, the physicists, Nobel Prize winners can be wrong about stuff, I'm not saying that it's bad about, that I'm not trying to be ugly at them. I'm just saying we all make mistakes, okay? And so but I think I tried, as I told Kim a while ago in making this, they made a statement there, and there was a part of me saying, well, these guys are recovery system that put this information out, so they ought to know. I mean, they got all the background and education, and so, but I didn't necessarily totally agree with it, And so I'll give you the information and then tell you kind of my perspective on it. How about that? Sounds fair? We okay with that? You're still here? Okay, so giving up an addictive way of life moves you into a new way of life. And that's like going from Venus to Mars. It's a whole new system. Even though you're living with maybe even the same, you're in the kind system, but it's a whole new system to you. And so you're like you're a fish that no longer is living in water. I mean, you didn't leave the earth, but you're in a new system. So you have to learn what you're doing. And there are benefits for having a new life, altering these behaviors, being able to not to be caught in these traps, not allowing it to extract mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, financial energy out of your life, okay? Because those extreme coping mechanisms do that to us. Yes, they were there to help us to survive, but just like the grief that we're talking about, if you stay in grief for too long, then it has an extreme negative effect in your life. Is that okay? And so, giving up the old friends and family. I mean, sometimes we have to, this is one of the main topics here. When we get into sobriety, there's a lot of changes. And we have to make healthy choices for ourselves. We have to create different boundaries, right? Different boundaries. We have to decide what's healthy for me. I can't do the things that I used to do, or I'm going to be back where I used to be. Does that make sense? Right? So I may not be able to be around the people that I used to be around, or the places that I used to be, people, places, and things. I may have to make some choices. You have to decide what's best for you. But the fact of it is, if you have situations in your life that create triggers, or if they affect you, if they cause depression or anxiety, you ought to see why. Does that make sense? Now, the information here says you just need to eliminate those. I'm saying you need to investigate those, right? Okay, because it's been in my experience, personal experience in working with people, if you just do something because I say or somebody else says or the information says, and you just say, well, they say that I need to eliminate all this, okay? Whether it's my family or friends or whatever, which may be really healthy, but at the same time it is, if I don't do it because I know that it's really in my best interest, it's not gonna work out for you.
Won't last.
It won't last.
If you don't understand it, it's just sobriety, it's not recovery.
Right. You're not changing inside. And so you need to investigate, you need to look at it. And the fact of it is, you're being triggered and relapse is a good indication that you need to look at it, okay? Because if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get the same thing again, right? Right? You know, it's kind of like somebody said here several months back, I don't want to go back to jail, so I got to stop doing this stuff, right? But it's really bigger than just stop doing this stuff. I have to change how I think and how I feel, how I see the world, okay? How I believe about things. And I know that's hard, that's complex and stuff, but if you don't work on that stuff, where are you going to end up?
Because what you're talking about is that if you don't do it, a lot of times we go to jail, we get in trouble because we react from a trigger. And if we don't do what you're saying, we're gonna react. You know, and we all have people in our lives who know how to push that button. Or life will push that button. You know, and so if we don't change those internal things, then we are gonna react. Well, we're gonna, life is gonna give us, our mate's gonna give us the opportunity, somebody's gonna give us the opportunity to react.
Right.
And when we react, we do go back to jail.
Right, and see, and some people from the outside says, well, just don't react. But see, the fact of it is, if you get triggered, you go into, your amygdala takes over, and it takes you out of your cognitive awareness and puts you into a place that you may not and probably don't even have too much control over. So as soon as you're triggered, if it's a severe trigger, okay, because there's degrees of triggers. If it's a severe trigger, you may have already got hooked into the process even before the severe trigger. So the reaction is so important, but you're gonna have to stop it somewhere. Where are you gonna do it? You're the ones in charge, okay? Okay? And if you're, this is a trick statement, okay? At least I believe it is, because I found it not to be true, because I tested it out. If you think that you're so mentally and emotionally aware that you can withstand the problem, you're just fooling yourself. Because I tried it and it didn't work.
You said it a lot nicer than I said. When people say that to me, they say, well, just don't take the bait, just don't let yourself, just don't react. I say, okay, well, let me punch you in the face and you don't react.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you were a littler guy, that would be really effective, because see, when you're little, then they definitely would react. They may not be able, they may choose to not react, depending on how big they are.
Even if I knock them out, when they get up, they react. It's human nature. It's fight or
Maybe it's
flight.
run away, right?
It's fight or flight.
Right, it's true, because it's
fight or flight.
reaction.
Yeah.
And when we're experiencing an emotional experience as grief, because I want to come back into that target that we're talking about, that grief can alter our ability to be mentally focused, be in control, because it can pick you up and carry you away. Missing something, a song, a smell, an event, driving by a liquor store or just a convenience store that's selling liquor, that maybe you did that. You know, I don't know how many times people said, I never had anybody want to give me any dope until I decided I was going to get clean. I know in my own life, I never had anybody want to give me alcohol until I decided I wasn't going to drink anymore. And it's just kind of amazing. Why does that happen? You tell me. But it seems to happen very regularly. And you probably know somebody that's happened to. And another thing is, I've had a number of folks said, I was just walking along, and there it was. This land right there. I never found any before, but now we have. So let's go on. For most people in recovery, and we're either in recovery, I'm talking about the whole world, we're either seeking recovery or we're not. How's that statement? Okay. And the truth is probably there's a lot that's not. Because they don't even know, you know, it's not their problem, it's somebody else's problem. I can do a little bit, I can rationalize it out, you know, it's my parents used to do it, or that's what everybody does, or that's the way that it is, or, you know, and those things creep up on you, they take you over. So saying goodbye to this behavior or these substances is like losing an old friend, because we depended on them. They were always there. It's like oftentimes when people talk to me about wanting to know how to stop smoking, and I said, you know, smoking has been a faithful companion to you. It's been there all along. It's been your friend. It helps you to relax. You have fond feelings of it. You know, you can talk to it, but it doesn't talk back. various different things. Never gets mad at you. You know, it's just killing you. But other than that, you know, it's and so we see these things as fond friends. Would you agree with that? Now the question is why?
A lot of it's coping mechanism.
It's some way to escape the moment. And there are healthy escapes and there's unhealthy escapes, correct? And the trouble is, it seems to be easier to find unhealthy ones, right? Okay. I heard something recently about the astronauts. Now, that's in space, how they cope with stress. And one of the ways they learned how to cope with stress is by looking out the window of the spacecraft and take pictures and look at the Earth and get focused on what that out there instead of all that's in there and all the possibilities that might happen. Because, I mean, you talk about really being out of control of a lot. We don't know. We don't know, but they don't know either. They know some stuff. Somehow they get enough information to be able to manage their psyche, but that's one of the things that they have to investigate with astronauts is their mental toughness, ability to function under extreme, stressful situations. But we're going to drop it. I've got to get into this forever. Okay, you know, when we have the death of a loved one, and we use coping mechanisms. I don't know how many. Well, it's been several. Let's just put it this way: there's been several funerals that I have officiated that, as soon as the funeral was over and everything kind of broke down, then and some of the family decided they were gonna deal with the death of the person that passed away, by having a beer party right there at the graveside. And I'm not, I mean, I can understand that because that's where they're at. But the fact of it is, that tells you something, right? And if they don't do it there, they did someplace else, right? Why? Because that's the only way they know how to cope with their loss. And it means they had strong emotions and connections, and they feel something, but they don't want to feel it, right? Just like the rest of us don't want to feel it, because it's tough stuff. And what we have to do is we have to find healthy mechanisms, and that's what a funeral service is all about. And how I try to deal with my services that I do is I try to help people process through their loss, to help them begin a healing process, and try to help them move through some of their present anger. And sometimes I'm successful, and sometimes I'm not. But I try. I just threw that in there. So, let's go ahead and start with the 5 stages of grief from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. When I learned this many years ago, and this was back in the 70s, there was like 8 or 10 of them at that time. Now they've condensed them down to 5, which is fine with me. They had shock and I just remember shock being in there. There was several, but they're all pretty much the same thing. The first one is denial, and denial, as I mentioned to Tommy a while ago, is a natural defense mechanism to help us to deal with the knowledge of this loss, because we don't want to deal with this. It could be a challenging situation where we don't want to deal with it, so we just kind of turn that off. Okay, and it's a way to push back that death, because there's a part of us that says, if I don't accept it, then it's not real. Kind of like your reference about I was looking to see my mom alive, and I learned at an early age that's one of the things about a memorial service, a funeral service, is to be able to see the deceased loved one, if at all possible, to help our mind get a picture of them being in a place of peace, that you know where they're at, and your mind's able to process that. When you don't have that, and I actually experienced this with a good friend of mine that died at sea, my brain kept finding him in crowds years after his death, and until I realized what was going on, and I needed to address that. You know, I asked the question, why am I doing that? Why is my brain doing that? Okay, and that's because I never ever I never finished that. I never brought it to a completion about him, even though we had a memorial service, but they never found the body, so we, never had him. So that's a side note. So, I had a cousin that we were the same age, and his dad died when we were young, 9, I think, and he told me years later that he wouldn't go. I knew that he wouldn't go to the funeral service. I was there with my parents, and he told me years later that not going to his dad's service really affected him, because his imagination gave him more pictures than what reality would have, is my definition. Does that make sense? don't you, Tommy?
Yeah.
Because our brain likes to create things, and it usually goes to a negative extreme. Right? So denial is a healthy process, and but we have to be aware of that. That's the beginning of the process. I remember after my dad died, it was probably a year or so after it, probably closer to a year, I said, I remember, I know where I was at when I was driving, because it seemed to happen every day right at this part of the road. I don't know why, okay, we talk about triggers. I would have this extreme pain in my chest, and I remember this one particular day, I said, how long do I have to put up with this? Now, the trouble is, there was a part of me that didn't want to let go, and there was the other part of me that wanted not to be there. So I didn't want it to go, but I did want it to go. So I was keeping it there. Why? Because I would have preferred to change the past, right? But can you change the past? No, you can't change the past. I know you can't change the past. I knew that. I knew that before he died. I couldn't change the past, right? But yet, that doesn't mean our emotions will do what we know, right? That's part of the problem here, and it's the reason why it's a process. So now, doesn't mean that we like it, okay, to come out of denial. I didn't like it, I still don't like it, okay? But that's the way that it is. Even though I knew that's the way it was then, but there was still a big part of me that didn't want to accept it. Does that make sense? Anger is the emotion that oftentimes we can go into, and it's not absolute that you go through denial, anger, and bargaining, okay? But you can do some of all these together, but oftentimes denial, we finally come to that, and we get mad. Like I said, how long I was getting, that was kind of a statement of anger, but we get angry. And as we get angry, then that means that anger normally causes some sort of action, where denial is oftentimes very passive. Does that make sense? This is in Doug's opinion. And so anger will help you to confront, or better confront, the situation. And it's not the situation out there, it's the situation in here. How's that sound? And oftentimes, and I tell people all the time, oftentimes, if you believe in God or a higher power, you get mad at God or the higher power or whoever else that you can direct your anger at, whoever is the highest authority there, and that's all right. If you get mad at God, He understands. He gets it. Okay. In fact, God would prefer you to be mad at Him instead of ignore Him, in my opinion. Okay. Let's skip on down here. Bargaining. We want to we finally, when we go through some anger and we start to go into it, then we try to make some deals. I'll just be a better person. Don't let this happen. I will fix my life. I will stop this. I'll stop that. I'll start doing this. We start doing this type of bargaining to try to deal with our grief, because we think that somehow we can fix it. Does that make sense? We can make it not be the way that it is somehow by bargaining. Any comments from anybody? Okay, all right. We also think in bargaining, if we can find the blame, or if we take the blame or project the blame, then somehow that will fix the situation, because then we can right it if there's something or somebody to blame, even if it's ourselves. And that, again, is very, very destructive, because you're still not dealing with it yet, but it's part of the process, okay? So when you go to doing that, then you need to know, well, even though I don't think I'm better, I'm maybe getting a little better, okay? All right, the next one, we go with the bargaining, and then we begin to realize that that's not gonna work, right? The bargaining's not gonna work. There's nothing I can't pay God off or do anything to change reality. That sounds kind of rough, didn't it? But, I need, whether it's in loss of loved one, or we loss of that lifestyle, I'm making a bargain, well, I won't be as bad as I used to be, I won't do as much as I used to be, I'll just keep some of these tokens for memory's sake, okay? Or like one guy that we helped turn in a drug lab, he decided that he'd keep back the hard-to-find drug, and that was his decision. We got rid of everything else, but not drug, but chemical. And that was real good until it wasn't, if you know what I mean. So, of course, I didn't know about it when we were doing it, but yet that's the way things are. So then we go into depression, because now we've done these other things, and basically, in my mind, we're getting depressed. We fall into nihilism. In other words, we start losing hope, because we're going to have to accept reality the way that it is, and we still don't want to. And so I like this definition. It's a simple definition, and so I use it a lot on depression. It's kind of like depressed or repressed is that you're unwilling to deal with the reality, so you keep pushing it back, and you keep shoving those emotions down, and that you are depressing that because you don't want to deal with that. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. And so then we continue to do that, and as we do that, as far as people in recovery, if we make ourselves miserable enough, this is one of the times that you can have a real tendency for relapse to pop up, because you become overwhelmed. You become depressed. Well, if I just do this, or if I just do that, then I'll feel better. There's nothing wrong with that, kind of like what you said earlier. I'll just do one. It's always I'll just do one. Until you hit the 2, and then the 3. And so we just need to be aware of this, and the way that you manage it. And I'm gonna throw out some suggestions how to deal with some of these things. I'm gonna do it really quick. But so then we need to come to the place that through our depression, that basically I want to shortcut this. I'm going to say we finally have wore ourselves out to the place that we finally accept it, okay, and that we're willing to accept reality the way that it is, and that's when we move into acceptance. And you may not like it, okay, you probably won't like it, because it's not the reality that you wanted. It's not the way that it is. I want to be able to do, if it's in the drug or alcohol world, I want to be able to do what everybody else is doing. How many times have I heard this? How come they can go have fun and I can't? I've heard that multiple times. And they can. But is it going to get you what you want? What you really, really want? And but while we're in acceptance, you can have sadness, you can have regret, you can have anger, you can have all these different emotions and segments in our life. But all that is to help to bring you into a new reality. Because what we have, whether it's getting into recovery or loss of a loved one or something that's precious to you, valuable to you, is that we accept life the way that it is and then figure out some way to deal with it. Okay, I remember when they said that Dad was going to die, and people started calling the hospital, and they said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "We'll deal with it." I decided on my reply before people started calling. Okay, we'll just deal with it. We'll just deal with it. Now, I didn't know what that meant. Okay, but that's what we're going to have to do. I mean, the alternative is not deal with it, avoid, hide, cover it up, pretend it's not happening. How's that going to work out? Okay, so we're going to deal with it. And so we're going to do our best to deal with it. Now, I'm not going to talk about that. So here are some ideas that may be helpful, okay? I'm going to run through these pretty quick. And that is, number one, we need to take care of ourselves. Grief is exhausting, right? Grief is exhausting. It's emotional energy just running out of us, right? Because it's not the way we want it to be. And so it's happening. And that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to make smart decisions, like, what we eat, what we drink, whether we're getting rest or we don't get rest, or we sleeping too much or we're not sleeping enough, all that stuff, right, to help us. You either do stuff to help yourself or you do stuff to harm yourself, right? Number two, I said I was going to hurry. Reach out to friends and family that might be able to help you to deal with your feelings. And you can talk to them, that you can connect with, that get it. They get what's going on. Does that make sense? And again, you have to be selective on who you connect with. Okay. If you connect with somebody who just tells you, just pretend that it didn't happen, fake it till you make it, those are not really, even though you may love them, but their information is not very helpful, in my opinion. Okay? Number three, avoid triggers that may lead to relapse. We kind of already talked about this, right? We need to avoid them. We need to avoid people. We need to avoid things. We need places. We need to not expose ourselves to stuff that set us up. If you're involved with people or places or things that cause you to be uncomfortable, you probably ought to find out why. Okay? So you either address why you're uncomfortable, or you're going to suppress that, and then you very possibly could fall into a place that you don't want to be. How's that? Be aware of special dates. We talk about this a lot here at Saturday Night Live, dates, anniversaries. We need to be aware of these seasonal things. I have people that I've worked with that I knew when a particular calendar time of the years come around, that it was a couple of months, and you say, well, that's pretty big. Well, it's just the way that it was. It was a couple of months of the year. And the first couple of years, it took a while to grab a hold of it. But when you see a pattern developing, and so and we forget. Sometimes we can never forget, but then sometimes we block it out. Our brain blocks it out because it thinks it's helping us. But we need to be aware. And the reason why we're aware is so that you can take appropriate, healthy action to help yourself instead of ignoring it or denying it. What does that mean? You plan something healthy instead of letting yourself end up in a place that's not healthy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Nobody here's ever done the unhealthy part, but you know someone that did, right?
Yes,
I can only speak for you.
So, and we need to make sure that we don't isolate ourselves. I got that in a box. Self-isolation. Boy, some people, that's their go-to drug. I was just pausing there for effect. Number 5, record your feelings in a journal. This is so helpful. Journaling. I don't do it, but I know that it's helpful. I have done some of it. Actually, I've done it in a Google Doc and on some of those but you know, when you ask yourself a question or you write down what's going on or what's bothering you, I've sat at my desk and say, what's bothering me? And you write it down. There's something about writing things down and seeing it that's helpful. At least it's helpful to me. Other people say it's helpful to them. And you have to figure out what works for you. But then it's like it becomes real when you can see it in black and white, down on paper. And then when it's no longer abstract, okay, or up there in that mystical swirling energy above your brain, and then you can say, well, what do I need to do about it? Because when you ask a specific question, your brain goes to work for you, to try to help you. And so journaling is a very, very helpful tool, or reading books that can inspire you, that have folks that may have had situations similar to or related to what's going on in your life. Number 6, get moving. Exercise is so beneficial because it releases drugs into your system. That's better than Prozac, according to the doctors, that exercise will give you that, and there's no side effects to it. And and it helps you in so many different levels because it eliminates some of the other chemicals that's negatively affecting you and releases some positive, healthy chemicals that benefits you. And you're able to possibly think better, at least that's the way it works for me, think better and clearer, and you have less emotional press or distortion after you've done some exercise. I know some people don't like exercise. I don't know. There's a lot of people who don't like exercise. Probably if I had a better method than exercise, I'd probably use it. But the fact of it is, the doctors told me not to do it, and I told them I like myself better when I do. So they said, well, okay, well, do it this way if you can. Yes, doctor. We'll leave it right there. So try to give back. Another method, this is number 7, try to give back. Do something for others. Kindness affects you and it affects those that you're doing something for. And there also research shows that if somebody just observes an act of kindness, it affects them too. Okay? And so it alters your mental state. And when you do an act of kindness because you want to, not because you have to, as I taught here a few weeks ago, that it literally has long-term residual effects, days, maybe even weeks. Okay, does that make sense? Let's see, where are we at? Okay, prayer and meditation daily, that you have to do what helps you, what works best for you, and a time of quiet, solitude, reflection, however long that is. I like what Dr. Carolyn Leaf says, 30-second prayer is better than no prayer at all. Always like that. Number 9, stick to your original self-care plan. create a plan and try to stick to it. When you're not following your plan that you laid out for you, then you know that you've done messed up. Yes? Yes, amen, that's right. And so if we'll do that, then, and some of it may be being in the meeting, being connected to information, listening to information, reading, talking, connecting, sponsors, all that type of stuff. Okay, self-care. We talk about that often. Last one, yay! While it's true that there is no set time to reframe or deal with grief, it is important to know that if it carries on, it says here, for more than 12 months, then you may need to address it by getting some sort of help, whether it's professional help, a good friend, talking to somebody about it, okay? Okay, we're just gonna stop right there. Any comments or questions? You looked at me, okay, did you have a thought? Had a Kate thought?
So,
I have a quote that I didn't read tonight. Shall I read this quote to you? Are you sure? This is from Woodrow Wilson. He said, "You should not only use all the brain you have, but all the brain that you can borrow." I thought it was kind of neat. There's nothing wrong with that saying, right? Any comments? May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may His face shine upon you and give you His peace. Paul, you want to close this out?
You're good.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I am